Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jake Mitchell. Thank you for being here. I'm a senior at Oklahoma State University in the Fire Protection and Safety Engineering Technology program. I've been invited here this afternoon to share with you my senior project, which is titled Preliminary Analysis of Accumulation of Carcinogenic Contaminants in Retired Turnout Gear. This project was done in conjunction with Dr. Rob Agnew of Oklahoma State University, as well as Dr. Julian Wong of the University of Oklahoma. I'm excited to share this with you today. The basis for this project was born from something that is very close and personal to me. Upon completing 25 years in the fire service and retiring, a close family member of mine was diagnosed with a terminal cancer less than 2 years later. He's not been alone in this experience. Firefighters in the United States experience a 9% higher rate of cancer development, as well as a 14% higher rate of death from cancer compared to the general population. This is due to the presence of PNAs, or polynuclear aromatic hydrocarbons, in smoke. PNAs are known to be carcinogenic in nature. It is important to note that polynuclear aromatic hydrocarbon is a term that's synonymous with polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbon, or PAH. Both are used widely in the industry. As many of you may know, personal protective equipment is designed to protect our firefighters from these exposures. SCBA is designed to protect their respiratory systems from these products of combustion, and structural firefighting gear is designed to protect their bodies from the exposures. SCBA and bunker gear has been engineered and re-engineered and continues to improve every year. However, we are still seeing these elevated rates of cancer in the fire service. In order to investigate this problem, we hypothesized that these PNAs, which contaminate the outside of the gear, are A, residually contained in the gear after decontamination, and B, that they are mobile through all three layers of the gear, leading to durable exposure. Due to a donation from the Oklahoma City Fire Department of about 20 retired structural firefighting ensembles, we were able to take some of these, remove some samples, and look at them under a microscope. The analytical method that we chose for this phase of the project is called scanning electron microscopy, or SEM. SEM provided us with a qualitative analysis of fiber degradation and foreign body content within the threads. If you look at the magnified image on the left, which is of an outer canvas sample of bunker gear, you will see that the fibers have been torn and degraded over time. When you look at the sample on the right, which is from another set but of the same material, you can see foreign bodies that are actually contained on the threads. Through the SEM analysis, we had no way of knowing what these foreign bodies were, but we had a couple ideas of what they may be. While it's a safe assumption to make that some of the foreign bodies contained within the fibers were dirt and other materials that are not necessarily dangerous to life and health, we hypothesized that some of these materials were in fact PNAs or PAHs. In order to quantify and identify these materials, it required further analysis. In the next slides, I'm going to discuss the samples that we chose for further analysis and the methodology that we used to analyze them. Of the 20 sets that were donated to us from the Oklahoma City Fire Department, 2 of those were chosen for analysis. The choices of the 2 sets had to do with both of them being of the same manufacturer, generally about the same manufacturing date, and they were both used for 8 years of service. Judging by the look of these 2 sets, they were heavily used throughout their 8 years. 4 samples were taken from both pairs of pants. 1 from the ankle, 1 from the knee, 1 from the buttocks, and 1 from the crotch area. We chose to use the sample from the ankle due to the obvious level of contamination that you can see in this photograph. We wanted to look at the knee due to the route of exposure straight to the knee through bending and moving around, but there were too many layers in the knee for the 3-layer analysis that we were proposing to use for this project. It is worth noting that in the future, the crotch area might be another area of concern due to the rates of testicular and prostate cancer within members of the fire service. Each sample was removed using a method adapted from the CDC. A straight razor blade, scissors, and rubber gloves were used for each collection. In between each collection, these materials were cleaned with isopropyl alcohol, 99%, and the gloves were changed. Each sample was stored individually in a plastic bag marked with its sample number. While we were as careful and clean as possible during this collection process, it's also important to note that this gear has been transported from the Oklahoma City Fire Department to us and stored in an area that was not decontaminated. However, we believe that this did not have a serious However, we did not believe that this had a serious effect on the outcome of this project. In this slide, you will see a photograph of the coat that belonged to the pants from the last slide. As you may have noticed, there's significantly less visual contamination in the coat as there was in the pants. For this reasoning, we decided to space out our samples all to different areas of the ensemble coat. This led to a sample from the elbow, armpit, collar, center back, coat tail, and over the heart. After time and consideration, we decided to go with the over the heart sample due to the closeness of proximity to the heart and other vital organs. Additionally, it's safe to assume that at many points during the firefighting process, the over the heart section of the gear may be pressed tightly against the body, whether it be a ground attack, carrying equipment, or any other reason. Similarly to the way that we wanted to use the knee of the pants for analysis but couldn't due to the extra layering of the knee pad, we wanted to use the elbow due to the point of contention that you would have by bending and stretching your arms. However, there was additional padding in the elbow as well, and we did not have the means of analyzing the extra layers. The coat tail appears to be the most heavily contaminated area of the coat, but there is not a direct dermal exposure from the coat tail due to the pants being worn and generally the undershirt being tucked into the pants. The collar is also an area that could be used in further analysis, but again, the type of materials that make up the collar are different than the general 3-layer samples that we were looking at. These samples were collected and stored in the exact same way it was described for the pants. Once our 4 3-layer samples had been collected, it was time for further analysis. High-performance liquid chromatography with fluorescence ultraviolet detection via NIOSH method 5506 was chosen for our analysis method. NIOSH 5506 gives an output of PNA content in microgram per sample. You can see the detection limits for the 5506 method in the table on the right. All of our samples were cut to an area of 4 centimeters squared, 2 centimeters by 2 centimeters. By dividing the output of the PNA content in microgram per sample by the 4 centimeters squared, we were able to get an output of microgram per sample, which you will see in the coming slides. NIOSH method 5506 analysis was conducted at Liberty Mutual's Industrial Hygiene Lab in Massachusetts. On this slide, you will find the NIOSH 5506 results that were returned to us from the lab for the A10 and B10 samples. Sample A10 is denoted in pink purplish color, while sample B10 is denoted in orange color. Detectable limits were found in the outer canvas and moisture barrier of both samples. However, both samples' thermal protective linings did not return any detectable PNA limits. This did not necessarily support our claim of PNA mobility through all 3 layers of the gear leading to dermal exposure, but it is important because we were able to identify the PNAs that were found within the gear. You may notice that the list of PNAs on this table is significantly shorter than the detection limits found in the slide before, but that is because not all PNAs were detected. There are a multitude of reasons that could describe the nonlinear correlation between PNA concentrations given for the over-the-heart samples. We hypothesized that during the decontamination process, as bunker gear is removed and stripped by layer for washing, that cross-contamination could occur. We are also not completely sure how this gear has been stored since retirement before it was donated to us, and whether or not it was stored in a contaminated area, such as a fire bay or truck, or if it was stored in a safe place, such as in a container or in a closet. On this slide, you will find the lab results for our ankle samples that we sent off, which provide a much more linear relationship. This is more promising than the over-the-heart samples in terms of supporting our PNA mobility theory. Sample A1's outer canvas layer provided the highest PNA concentration of any sample that we had analyzed. It makes sense to say that the ankle samples were much more highly contaminated than the over-the-heart samples due to the close proximity of boots to the fire ground and contaminants that rest on the ground. While sample A1 has a pretty significant drop-off from the outer canvas to moisture barrier to thermal protective lining layers, Sample B1 provides a very linear looking relationship between the three samples. While the angle results of this analysis did indeed indicate the linear relationship that we were looking for previously, it became clear very quickly that a much larger amount of samples is going to need to be analyzed before a true correlation can be drawn. The data is just simply too sparse. However, I do not mean to downplay the importance of these findings. We identified carcinogenic contaminants in more samples than not of this sample set that was analyzed. This could still open many doors to finally start answering some questions as to why our nation's firefighters are suffering from and dying from cancer at such an elevated rate compared to the general population. I would also like to point out that a sample area of 4 centimeters squared might just be too small to meet the detection limits via NIOSH 5506 method. It was also very expensive to have these samples sent off to the Liberty Mutual lab to be analyzed. Oklahoma State University should be completing an HPLC lab here soon on campus, which will significantly reduce the cost of analyzing these samples and open the window for a much larger scale study to take place. In summary, the results of this preliminary analysis did not necessarily indicate P&A mobility through all 3 layers of our samples. There does seem to be a little bit of evidence supporting P&A mobility from the outer canvas to the moisture barrier layer, but something is stopping the P&As in between the moisture barrier and the thermal protective lining. This may have to do with the fact that the thermal protective lining is a significantly tighter woven thread count than the outer canvas and the moisture barrier layers. Again, I would like to point out that the identification of residual P&As inside these retired structural firefighting ensembles is a very important finding. This finding just does not necessarily support dermal absorption as a route of ingestion of these P&As. I still do not believe that it is safe for these chemicals to be contained within the gear, especially after being used for so long. As I mentioned previously, more data is going to be needed to support these findings. This preliminary analysis laid the groundwork for the study to be reproduced on a larger scale, but more data is going to be needed before conclusions can truly be drawn. It is my hope that someone will see this study and be motivated to continue on with this research, whether it be here at Oklahoma State University or somewhere else in the United States or even the world. Looking forward to the future, I believe that our scientific community has the technological resources to take larger steps than we currently are to prevent cancer in our nation's firefighters. Replication of this study on a much larger scale would allow to indefinitely decide if yes, these P&As are migrating through all 3 layers leading to dermal absorption, or no, we could throw that theory away. I do not have enough evidence here to stake a claim either way. I also believe that there's a lot of factors that could change the level of exposure that firefighters receive on the fire scene. Fireground positioning and department size could both have serious implications on the level of contamination that someone is exposed to throughout their career. A metropolitan firefighter in New York City who fights 3 structure fires a week is going to be significantly more contaminated than a micropolitan firefighter in a rural area who receives 3 calls a week in total. Decontamination practices and culture surrounding decontamination practices could also have a massive effect. In the last few generations of the fire service, as more and more data has come out, more and more firefighters are serious about their decontamination practices. And I like that trend. I hope that it continues the way that it's been going. In my experience of speaking with many retired and young firefighters alike, I think that each generation of firefighters that moves through the fire service is going to know more and be better than the last. I also believe that manufacturing differences between types and models of structural firefighting ensembles could have a serious effect on the contaminants that become trapped in between the threads. A cheaper canvas may degrade quicker, allowing more contaminants to become trapped. Fabric type and thread count could seriously affect these outcomes. Although we began this research study with a relatively simple question looking for a relatively simple answer, we are left with more questions than answers. I don't believe that this is a negative outcome. I actually think that this is a favorable outcome. This is the way that science should work. As we find more information, we should yearn for more, especially when the implications are so huge. I'm extremely grateful that even during a global pandemic, the scientific community is still finding ways to get together and share information. It has been a great honor to be here with you all this afternoon, and I hope that you learned something during my presentation. I would like to give a quick thank you to Professor Tim Wilson at Oklahoma State University for advising me on this project, Oklahoma City Fire Department for the donation of their firefighting ensembles, and the Liberty Mutual Industrial Hygiene Lab for doing a stellar job with our HPLC FUV analysis. I'm now going to be open for any questions. I will answer it to the best of my ability, and if I do not have the current ability to answer your question, I will make sure to make note of it and get back with you as quick as possible. Thank you.